Good morning and welcome to this Euractiv online event, which is kindly supported by Iberdrola, the Spanish electricity company. My name is Frédéric Simon, I'm the Energy and Environment Editor of Euractiv, and I will be your host for today's event, which is titled How to Deliver Ambitious Climate Targets While Protecting Consumers. Today's discussion on climate policy and consumers comes in the midst of a global energy crunch, a situation which is causing concern, especially in the east of the European Union, where questions have been raised about the impact of EU climate policies on energy prices. So, what do we know about the interaction between climate policy and energy prices from a consumer perspective? And can the Fit for 55 package provide an answer to the energy price crunch in the short or the long run? To discuss this topic today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Nicolas Gonzalez Cassares, a Spanish lawmaker with the Socialists and Democrats group in the European Parliament, Adela Tessarova, Head of Unit for Consumers, Local Initiatives and the Just Transition at the European Commission's Energy Directorate, Jamel Lofredo, Energy Policy Officer at BEUC, the European Consumer Organization, Elisabeth Cordago, Research Fellow at the Centre for European Reform in London, and Julio Castro, Chief Executive Officer at Iberdrola Renewable Energies. Welcome to all of you, and thanks for joining us today. We'll start this virtual conference with a series of short opening statements from the speakers, and then we'll turn to a Q&A session that will also include questions from the audience. To ask a question, simply use the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will take questions directly from there. I think that's all for me, so without further ado, let me give the floor now to Nicolas Gonzalez Casares. Nicolas, the floor is yours.
Let me switch on the micro.
Yes, now you need to unmute yourself. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Perfect. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to this event. I think the title of this event is very pertinent because protected citizens is the objectives of the work we are carrying out with the implementation of the EU Green Deal and with the Fit for 55 package, protect ourselves from climate change. After the grid lockdown, we have established a sustainable green recovery, and the Fit for 55 package shows a path to achieve our climate goals. We had recently the COP26 and the outcomes of the COP26 this weekend, and we could see how difficult it is to move forward internationally in the fight against climate change. However, it is necessary to move from promises to action. In our case, we should focus on implementing the package in an ambitious and equitable way with the social dimension, of course. Along with energy efficiency, decarbonizing the energy system through sustainable, renewable energies, I think, is essential. Regarding the European Union, we have some positive signals related with the deployment of renewables. As the State of the Energy Union 2021 highlights, renewables overtook fossil fuels in the power electrical system in the EU for the first time last year. But I think that we now have a problem with the prices. The electric sector is one of the easiest sectors to decarbonize and integrate renewables. We can cost effectively decarbonize sectors such as transport, industry, and buildings through electrification based on renewable energies and promote other energy carriers such as green hydrogen. For electrification to be successful, electricity must be competitive. However, the current wholesale markets that we see these weeks are not helping to promote the necessary electrification. We must take electricity market more efficiency. Yesterday, Acer has published its preliminary assessment of the current wholesale electricity market design and might is open to recommending changes. As co-rapporteur of the Renewable Energy Directive, I believe that the Commission has presented a good proposal with measures that strengthen promotion in sectors with more difficulties for the penetration of renewables. But it is essential that during this legislative process to maintain the integrity of the directive. It should only promote truly sustainable renewable energy. It's not only about climate neutrality. Today, energy imports in the European Union represent 61%. This should make us reflect on the vulnerability we have and explains a big part of the current energy prices crisis. To finalize, if properly framed from the onset, the transformative path towards a climate neutrality society can be the beacon of social progress for all, individually and collectively. Ecological and social progress can and should go hand in hand. The transition towards a climate neutral economy and society will be just, or there will be no transition at all. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicolas Gonzalez Cassares. Let me turn now to Adela Tessarova from the European Commission.
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. So as you know, the Fit for 55 package is all about energy efficiency and deploying renewable energies, but it is also about putting the consumer at the center. And we have a lot of proposals that have been tabled in July and will be tabled before the end of the year doing precisely this. And there are three things I would like to highlight. First, the package is empowering consumers further so that they demand green energy and they even supply green energy. We are looking, for example, at how energy communities could decarbonize the building stock. Second, or how we can increase the availability of green offers and access of consumers to green offers. Second, the package is protecting consumers further. For example, the current protection rights that exist for electricity, the package is expanding them for district heating. Then we are looking at protection of energy poor and vulnerable consumers across all energy legislation. For example, the decarbonisation of gas proposals of December will look into that. And third, and not leaving anyone behind, a very important element of the Fit for 55 package. For example, the Energy Efficiency Directive is looking at energy savings, how to prioritize energy savings among energy poor. The Commission proposed the Social Climate Fund to channel funding to eradicate energy poverty in member states. But of course, the Fit for 55 package is about structural medium to long-term measures. But we live in a world where we still consume fossil fuels. We live in a world where consumers are not very active in practice. And hence, we are all in a bit of a state of shock with the current high energy prices. That's why the Commission, on top of the Fit for 55, came with a toolbox, how to deal with the current situation in a short term and how to deal with it in the medium to long term. And it's the reality that many consumers are for the first time looking at their invoices, and they are for the first time asking themselves what I can do to reduce my energy bill. And I hope that while this is a shock for many of us, this is also an opportunity for many of us. And it's an opportunity to become active consumers and to actually use and demand the provisions that we have in the legislation and that are being implemented, will be implemented, and are only being proposed in some cases, to make sure that the consumer can actually be kind of the owner of their own destiny and choose, among green offers and actually, have the possibility to switch away from fossil fuels and choose a supplier which offers better prices. And so on. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adela Tessarova. Let me turn now to Julio Lofredo from BEUC. Julio.
Yeah, thanks, Federico, also for the invitation. Well, if we look at the numbers, it is clear that the reason of this crisis was an increase in gas prices. And well, having this in mind, what we're doing with the energy transition, and more in particular with Fit for 55, but also with other climate and energy policy proposals, goes into the right direction. We are reducing our reliance on gas. In this way, we are protecting consumers from this volatility of gas prices. And we're doing this in 4 ways. We are reducing energy demand thanks to energy efficiency in the Energy Efficiency Directive. We are shifting away from gas in heating, shifting to clean heating appliances thanks to the Renewable Energy Directive. We are promoting a shift away from gas in power generation to clean power generation in the Renewable Energy Directive. And we are promoting demand-side flexibility that will allow us to rely less on gas peaking plants. So, I mean, like, in paper, we are doing the right things. But if we look at what is happening on the markets, the picture is a little bit more mixed, because many consumers still cannot improve the energy efficiency of their homes because they don't have access to trusted advisors who can advise them on what solutions are best for them. Many consumers still cannot install a heat pump, for example, in their home because they cannot find an installer who can install such a heat pump. Many consumers still cannot install rooftop solar panels because there are important administrative barriers preventing them to do so. And many consumers still cannot engage in demand-side flexibility because they don't receive the appropriate financial incentives. So, all in all, what we need to protect consumers from these from this volatility in gas prices is really to put the consumer at the center of the energy transition. And we've been hearing this sentence for a decade now. And although some progress, well, much progress has been done, this progress in some areas has been quite limited. And it is really time now to walk the talk and really put the consumer at the center of the energy transition. And we need basically 2 things. The first thing is implementing the clean energy package. Member states need to lift those administrative barriers, not preventing consumers to install rooftop solar on their rooftops. And member states need to implement the measures in the Electricity Directive that allow consumers to engage in demand-side flexibility through dynamic electricity price contracts or through aggregation contracts. Second thing that needs to be done is really giving consumers access to trusted advisors and trusted installers of energy efficiency and of renewable heating and cooling appliances. The Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, as they were proposed, they go into the right direction because there are some measures that would empower consumers to have access to such professionals. But clearly, these measures need to be maintained and strengthened, and they need to be properly implemented by member states afterwards. So all in all, what consumers need is really to put forward legislation that is fit for the consumer, that allows the consumer to be an active actor in the energy transition. If we don't do so, then our reliance on gas will not reduce, which means that consumers will still be exposed to volatility in gas prices, and especially this package will not be fit for 55.
Thanks, Jamel Lofredo. And let me turn now to Elisabeth Cordago from the Center for European Reform.
Thank you. So I think we can see that while the Fit for 55 package does include a range of policy instruments, regulations, goals, I think it's fair to say that the centerpiece of the package is carbon pricing through the tightening of the existing ETS and through the creation of an additional one that would cover all transport and building heating. So how to make that work while protecting consumers? I think there are 2 keys to this, and both I think are particularly important and critical, in fact, at the time of spiking energy prices that we are experiencing. So the first one is redistribution of ETS revenues in a progressive manner, and the second is front-loading or low-carbon investments, so to reduce consumer reliance on fossil fuels for both heating and mobility. So in terms of redistribution, the new ETS on heating and on transport will de facto increase the cost of both activities. And this would make a proportionally larger dent, right, on budgets of lower income households. At the same time, increasing carbon prices on the current existing ETS have already boosted revenues from it. And the coverage as the coverage of ETS expands, carbon prices are increasing to reflect the ambitious climate goals. Revenues as a whole are increasing, and this should be used already starting today to more progressively distribute the benefits of the reflection of carbon prices towards consumers, and particularly with attention to poorest households. This is partly the aim of the proposed Climate Social Fund, but devoting only 25% of the new ETS revenues to the protection of vulnerable consumers, to the promotion of energy-efficient retrofits, for instance, would amount to about 10 billion per year, is unlikely to be sufficient, both for income support and investment support. The second aspect I mentioned that is necessary to protect consumers in the context of Fit for 55 changes is the front-loading of low-carbon investments. We shouldn't wait for the new ETS to kick in to start boosting investment in energy-efficient retrofits and to start promoting the electrification of transport and the shift towards soft mobility options. In fact, we should accelerate that investment so to make a dent in fossil fuel dependence of buildings and road transport. The plans that member states have presented in the context of the Recovery Fund do go in that direction, but at the same time, we have seen in a recent paper published by the CER that funds under the recovery plans will be about 45 billion a year towards climate action, and that is only a fraction of the approximately 460 billion a year in public investment that are necessary to meet 2030 emission goals. So to conclude, I think it's important to use ETS revenues for redistribution purposes and accelerate low carbon investment, front loading it in order to make sure that by the time new measures from the Fit for 55 package kick in, most importantly the new ETS, consumers will be already empowered and will have low carbon alternative means to the current fossil fuel ones, heating and road transport. Thank you.
Thanks, Elisabeth Cordago. And let me turn now to our final speakers for the initial round, and that is Julio Castro from Iberdrola.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Frederic, for your invitation to be in this event. Sorry for my voice, but I'm in a little bit of a cough with the cold weather that we are having in Spain in these days. I will try my best. Let me, first of all, talk about who is Iberdrola. That will take me a second. You were presenting us as a company based in Spain. That's true, but we have activity in electricity all across the European Union and also in the United Kingdom. We are a leader in onshore and offshore wind, also in solar PV and hydro. We are now building the largest facility in the Iberian Peninsula in Portugal, so-called Tâmega project. And we rely on the natural gas as a backup, as it has to be, as the best choice in terms of emissions and non-polluting technologies. Namely, I'm talking about huge investments, billions of euros that are conveyed through technology and to the best supply of customers. This is our belief and this is our business plan. But since about 2 or 3 months ago, we have seen two different topics that have been a little bit confused. First is expensive bills to customers. That's a reality. And we need to tackle on those and know exactly what happens. Namely, natural gas prices drive wholesale prices up. Also, carbon prices collaborate less than natural gas prices. And with the design that we have on the different markets, where we are seeing that the outcome might be for those being exposed to the daily market, that the bills are huge. Okay, that's a fact. Don't forget about that. But that's a second trend in the electricity world in Europe these days, which is a loss of confidence in the energy transition, namely in renewables, because we have this tool, this technological tool, as the one to clean and to avoid emissions. Well, by confusing these two, we as a company, we as a huge investor in these technologies, we are concerned, very concerned. In the middle of September, we saw a decree in Spain that was a draft and then implemented decree as well, on which the purpose of the piece of law, the regulation, was to lower the bills. So first topic, we fully agree with the bills to be controlled and with this crisis to be under screen. But the way of doing this in Spain was coming to the companies and saying that we were too greedy because we were having a huge income and taking part of it. Using figures that are very, let's say, cynical in order to describe the problem. If the market, the daily market, it's quoting at around 200 euro per megawatt hour, there was a tax imposed on the sales of something around 100, a little bit more than 100, 110, related with the gas prices. So you will not be so greedy and your margins are lowering. Well, if that's the case, maybe that's fair enough. But given that the sales of electricity are done on a term basis, with 2 years in advance, 1.5 or 1 year in advance, we were absolutely cost in terms of position. We were selling, and we are selling in the range of 60 to 70 euro per megawatt hour to our customers. And we were attending to a law implemented, a real law being applied from the 16th of September, according to which we had to pay 110, and the income was 60. So we were losing directly 50 euro per megawatt hour. No matter what university you go across Europe, doesn't matter which is the school of business that you go to get your master's degree, but losing 50 euro per megawatt hour means that in the next second you have to stop producing because you are not designed to lose money of your shareholders. Fortunately enough, across the following weeks to that decree being implemented, there was a strong answer from the industry and quite a welcoming environment from the government, listening and attending to the reality of the sales to customers in the market. And finally, there was another decree solving the solution according to which only those getting that income from the high market will be paid the tax. Now the reality is that that is not affecting our accounts, our P&L, and the worries and let's say the concern are now looking to those that you are describing, the first speakers before me, just helping the customers not to suffer in order to have a competitive supply, and those being very vulnerable to have the correct price in order for them to have a heating and the lights on. So today, after this, let's say 1.5 months of huge concern, the situation it's somehow on the peaceful side, and the real objective and target in Spain is to correct the design of the regulated tariff that is directly linked to the spot market, something that we think that is not correct, given that you will take the comfort from low prices whenever they happen in the future, but with such a situation like today's one, well, it's a kind of a disaster to transfer the spot wholesale prices to the most vulnerable customers. So I think that there's a huge concern. There's a lot of learning exercise across the period, and now the focus is absolutely correct. So for the next coming points that we will open across the debate, as a company, we are concerned about the paradigm of Europe of entering into the most cleaning technologies in order to have the less emissions and to have the most competitive prices. That's a very fair objective for the future, but in the first exercise of having these prices, it looked like our belief was vanished all of a sudden. Well, we saw the toolbox coming from the European Commission with a lot of comfort and belief that the current regulations and policies are correct, and what we need to implement are policies to take care of these high electricity bills coming from expensive gas prices. So please, let's have two different approaches for two different problems and two different solutions. Thank you.
Thanks, Julio Castro. And so we can start now the Q&A session. And let me start maybe with a question to Jamel Lofredo about the situation on the ground for the moment with the consumer organizations. So, Jaume, prices on energy markets have receded somewhat in the past weeks, and many governments have adopted short-term measures to alleviate the pressure on consumers. So, what is the current feeling among consumer groups in the European Union? Are they reassured by the measures that have been taken in their countries?
Thanks, Frederick. Well, first, let me say that, let me start with the obvious. Prices going up meant very high bills for consumers, meant that thousands of consumers were reaching out to consumer organizations who were, very concerned about these high bills. In many cases, they were not really able to pay for these bills. And in this context, it was fundamental to give an answer to those consumers. And we are very happy that the European Commission, with the toolbox, took the responsibility to give consumers these answers, and basically drafted a toolbox that contains very good measures. A couple of things that we very much welcomed was, first of all, clarifying that member states can reduce the level of taxation, can reduce, both of the excise duty and of the VAT. And we're happy that some countries, like Spain, for example, introduced a low VAT rate for the energy supply. We were also happy to see that the Commission basically recommended member states to tap into the additional VAT and ETS revenues to give some payments to consumers. And this is what, for example, France did, giving consumers a lump sum payment to help alleviate the impact of this increase in prices. All in all, some countries responded better than others, but those countries which really responded to these consumers' requests, actually did a pretty good job. One thing that was not mentioned in the toolbox, but we hope that it will be mentioned in the gas package, is introducing a bundle disconnections. Consumers, when they receive a high bill, a bill that they cannot pay, they are concerned that they might see their energy supply interrupted, which, especially during the winter, might be very dangerous for their health. What we hope to see right now, immediately from member states, but in the coming month from the European Commission, is introducing such a ban on disconnection, especially for vulnerable consumers.
Thanks, Jamel Lofredo. And so I understand you're pretty satisfied then with the European Commission's proposed toolbox. So let me turn now to Nicolas Gonzalez Cassares. What is your assessment of the toolbox that the European Commission put on the table now a few weeks from now? Do you believe this is the right answer to the energy price crunch that we're seeing in the past months?
I think the toolbox is welcome. We need some answer from the Commission to address this soaring of the energy and electricity prices. But I think that is not enough, because there are some measures that are not in this toolbox. I think that the Commission should be more ambitious. I want to read carefully the new dossier, the new report, assessment report from Acer, that they are saying that some things should be reviewed, but they are also saying that we have to wait until the spring. But I think that not only the measures could be, or the strongest measures could be only at member states level, because yes, some countries are reducing taxes, of course, like VAT, or for example, in Spain, the tax for generation of electricity. But I think that all these measures are not in the hand only of the governments. We need all the other measures from the Commission. All of us, we know that we have two different prices by now. in one hand, we have fossil fuels at top of the prices. In this case, the gas prices are the most problematic at this moment. On the other hand, we have the production or non-emitters energy like renewables or even nuclear. So I think that we have to keep in mind that we have these two levels. I'm not saying that I am against the marginalist market. Of course, I'm not. But we have to search for new measures for the future, because I think that these two levels are going to be here for a long time. Probably gas prices get down when the spring or in the coming months, but I don't see these fossil fuel prices returning to the level that there was before this crisis. And also we can see that in today, for example, how the CO2 prices are getting higher and higher, probably because the outcomes of the COP, that in certain way this is a good news. But of course, with very, very, very high CO2 prices, we can also have a problem with consumers, that we have to involve and engage all consumers in this ecological transition. I think this is a thing that we should keep in mind.
Thank you, Nicolas Casares. And so let me turn now to Elisabeth Cordago. A question to you similar to the question I put to the other speakers. Do you believe the Commission's toolbox is the right answer in the current context? Or do you believe, like Nicolas Casares, that there are shortcomings that need to be addressed as well?
I think broadly speaking, the toolbox did put forward meaningful suggestions, and in fact, I think it, to a large extent, also validated measures that various member state governments had already taken, right, in the emergency situations to help out their consumers. They did not really wait for the toolbox to put a limit on or artificially limit the energy taxes or the VAT taxes on energy, or to implement transfers. Now, I think what is worth saying is that these two types of measures have the same purpose, so protecting consumers from a very high spike in energy prices in the short term, but the message that transfers or caps on taxes and therefore artificial limitations of retail prices of energy bring are not the same. Because limiting the energy price, again, while that makes sense in let's say the emergency context of a price spike, does mute to a certain extent the message of scarcity that peaking prices of natural gas are conveying to consumers. Whereas transfers, I think, are in a way a better way to protect consumers, because they shield their income, they give them a way to face higher bills, while still showing them that, look, there is a spike in prices, so this is also a time to think about adapting energy consumption. This is also a time to think about considering energy efficiency improvements in the household. Now, of course, as Jaume said, consumers need to be put in the conditions to be able to afford those structural improvements in energy efficiency of their homes. So that is a different type of approach that requires subsidization to afford retrofits. But I think it's important to distinguish between transfers and caps on taxes to calm the effect of energy bills on consumers.
Thanks, Elisabeth Cordago. And Julio Castro, turning to you now, your views about the Commission's proposed toolbox. Do you believe this was the right answer at that precise moment in time?
Well, you are saying that it was the right answer, as a forward to my answer, and it was at the right time. We really think that being a little bit late in answer would be opening many different approaches from many different member states. But being too early, maybe that was not having enough thinking and being too fast in having extreme answers. That was not the case. The case has been very balanced, and the proposals first having trust in the model of decarbonization and in the renewables investments that are showing when the resource is present, wind, sun, and water, that is lowering the bills. So that's correct, and that's a strong support. And secondly, showing the concern on these bills to customers being too high for the specific moment, and outlining measures on taxation and charges. There's a lot of economic policy implemented in the electricity bills. There's a lot of written articles and books on this, and maybe it's the moment to start replacing that effort, and not only the electricity bills fighting against lowering emissions, also some other form of energy like oil and natural gas, and also, why not, the budgets of different member states to be considered. The social vouchers to be delivered to customers is a good policy, and many of the member states are following those. And the different designs that are implemented by different countries on the regulated tariffs for those to be protected. Well, the suggestion of hedging as much as possible on the term sales in order to avoid the price spikes. Again, those are very good recommendations. As Elisabeth was mentioning, the wrong would be trying to tackle on the prices. The price, it's a warranty that you will get the supply. Once you have the correct marginal market, as every single market in the world, all of them are marginal, you are paying the correct price, you have the good, you have the delivery. Once you have that, we need to implement for the coming future more choices of supply. LNG, it's something that it might be a good financial solution for hedging, not only for supply. For that, you need the regasification terminals here and there. Maybe we should be thinking if we have the correct ones in the correct places. Hedging, as I'm saying, not only to the bills, but also to the supplies of the different companies. Delaying bills and financing those delays. Having a social approach to different tranches of our customers. I mean, everything looks to be a solid block of recommendations. That's our view.
Thanks, Julio Castro. And let me stay with you for a follow-up question, and that is coming from the audience. One of our viewers, Mike Parr, who is a consultant on energy markets, he's asking whether you believe the marginal pricing, which is currently driving wholesale electricity prices, do you think this should be reformed in a way? And do you believe regulators can step in to reform this marginal pricing system? Do you think that would be desirable? Julio Castro, I think you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was just dispatching one emergency call. Can you just rephrase summarize on the?
Yes, it's one of our viewers is asking about the marginal pricing system, which is currently in place on the wholesale electricity market. Do you believe this is something that needs to be reformed? And can the regulators actually do something meaningful, do you believe, in the relatively short term?
Well, I think that the marginal methodology of setting prices is the only one that you can have for judgment. I mean, for the decision to dispatch the most efficient ways of producing energy in every single hour. So trying to move from this methodology into another one that may remind us about those monopolies back in 30 years ago or 40 years ago that might have political decisions on the unit commitment in the end, it's having a more expensive generation fleet. But that's on the dispatching. That's on having the correct units running every single hour. If you are thinking in the income that you get on the sales to customers in order to have the revenues for the business to run correctly, then you cannot think on an hourly basis. You cannot think on a daily basis. You need to think on a more term basis. So those two are different. I think that the marginalistic market, it's unavoidable, and it's the only way of dispatching LNG contracts, natural gas supplies, sales of flats and apartments in Amsterdam or in Madrid is the only way of doing things. Then the risk appetite as a customer that you may have to enter into a term deal other than the spot market, or the same appetite on the side of the supplier, it's something that you need to target with a methodology related with financial tools, or with the margin allocation that you may proceed either on the side of the customer or on the side of the seller. So those two are different, and I do not see an easy way of not spoiling the competitiveness of the generation fleet other than the marginalistic market today.
Thanks, Julio Castro. Let me turn to Adela Tessarova now for a quick comment on what we just heard about the reactions to the toolbox that the Commission proposed a few weeks ago. We heard some general satisfaction about the proposal, but also some concerns that the Commission could have gone further on some aspects. What is your reflection on this?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for and to all the colleagues here for their feedback, which I was actually noting down a lot of interesting and useful remarks, and thanks for the generally very positive feedback actually. Well, if you let me, I would maybe make a bit different comment in relation to what we have heard, because there is a lot of talk about wholesale energy prices. But here we are in an event about consumers. And in fact, consumers don't pay wholesale prices. Consumers pay retail prices, consumer prices. And, it's also an interesting reflection. And what we observe happening in the EU currently gives us a lot of lessons to be learned about how to structure the link between wholesale and retail prices. In principle, you have two types of retail prices. You have fixed or dynamic prices. You have prices which are fixed for 1 year or for a certain period of time, and then you have prices which are variable. And you have different types of variable prices. You can have a night tariff and morning tariff, and you can have peak and off-peak, and you can have hourly, and you can have a lot of, there are different variations, of course. And of course, you have also differently mature markets. You have consumers who have access to comparison tools, and they switch suppliers often, and they are used to do it, and that's the minority, of course. And then you have consumers who have never done it in their life, and they have been shielded from the market because they had a regulated price or because they are vulnerable, and maybe for the first time now their price jumped up, and they are confronted with a completely new world. And I think we have seen a particularly interesting experiment happening in Spain, where a regulated tariff is linked to dynamic price, which is a very unusual setup for reasons which are historic and well thought. And there was the idea to protect consumers, and for many years the spot prices were lower than forward prices. So that's why Spanish authorities have come up with this, I would say, experiment. And we see that this experiment has created some troubles in the current context. So I think there is a lot of learning going on these days. But I would like to stress this point really, that the wholesale market and the consumer price is not the same thing, and there are different ways of setting consumer prices, and in the first place they have to be set by the market. That's the rule. It's the market setting consumer prices. We can have some exceptions, such as vulnerable and energy poor, where the prices can be exceptionally set as a regulated price, but that's the minority of the market. The majority is market-based price setting, and options are unlimited, starting from fixed prices to dynamic prices on the other end of the spectrum. And I think the more dynamic the price the consumer is exposed to, or the consumer commits to, because always it has to be the decision of the consumer to sign up to a dynamic price. So the more dynamic price consumer signs up to, the more mature the consumer needs to be. I think it's difficult to expect that consumers who are, not very familiar with the market functioning would be able to realistically subscribe to dynamic prices, which are closely linked to the wholesale market. So the more dynamic the price consumer has, the closer the link to the wholesale market. But the more mature, the more knowledgeable the consumer needs to be. Otherwise, this doesn't work. I think that's one of the lessons we are learning in the current crisis. Thank you.
Thanks, Adela Tessarova. Let me turn now to another subject, which is the Fit for 55 package that the European Commission put on the table in July. So that was just as the energy price shock, let's call it, was building up during that time, but was not yet at full speed. Now we're seeing with this toolbox that the Commission put forward just a few weeks ago, we see the EU executive really pushing in the long run what's in the Fit for 55 package. So speeding up investments in renewables, energy efficiency, so that we can build greater resilience to external energy price shocks. So Julio Castro, let me put this question to you. How do you believe those investments in energy efficiency, in renewables, be speeded up? Do you believe some elements, for example, of the Commission's Fit for 55 package should be fast-tracked?
Well, the first thought that comes to my mind is the way of not doing this effort. And the way of not doing the effort, it's introducing turmoils, earthquakes, changes with not the necessary debate and agreement. Let's say changing the framework that we have on the regulatory environment in Europe all of a sudden, because there's a first event that we should be tackling with some other solutions on the electricity bill. So first of all, what we need is regulatory stability. That's a must, and we used to have that, and it was working, because we have arrived to year 2021 with an absolutely story of success of building and renewables, and also of reducing emissions. So the learn it's to follow doing what we have done in the past. Fast tracking is welcome. Running too fast, maybe that's not the correct way of doing things. I think the trilogue that we have in Europe is an example of the perfect democracy, and with the correct leadership that we are really having, the Fit for 55 fast tracked, and with the current view and focus and implemented in the correct way, is a really very, very promising story of attracting investment into the decarbonization effort in Europe. So I think that what we have to do from companies is encouraging regulators to follow exactly the same track that we were having before these turmoil in price spikes. And why not learn as well at the same time? There are a few issues on the taxation. There are a few issues on charging, a few issues on the billing, and on the design of the regulated versus liberalized markets that should be approached. So we can even improve. And on the technology side, we can also think that we may need a better implementation footprint in order to have more storage, in order to have a more hedged supply of the backup, namely on the capacity mechanisms. So there are the the possibility of following and keeping the historical success on implementing these policies, at the same time learning to improve a little bit more, and with the help of the funds that hopefully will be announced and released soon, altogether look like to be the promise of the investment. And we and many others are ready to secure the investments and to drive them to become a reality as a technology to have the most clean and competitive supply in Europe.
Thank you, Julio Castro. Let me turn now to Nicolas Gonzalez Cassares. Do you believe some elements of the Fit for 55 package should now be fast-tracked, given the situation that we have regarding high energy prices? Do you sense appetite in the European Parliament to put some bits of the package on the faster approval than others?
I think that first, the Fit for 55 package is very good. Can you? I cannot hear you.
Yes, we can hear you now. Go ahead.
Oh, perfect. For me, I think that the Fit for 55 package is very ambitious, of course, but I don't know if we need a faster track for some of the files, because we have a lot of files here in the Parliament. We are working with renewables, energy efficiency, taxation, the ETS, sustainable fuels for aviation, maritime, a lot of files. We also have to keep in mind that we need coherency and consistency. Okay, for example, when it comes to renewables, I think that we have to promote a massive deployment of renewables in the next 10 years to achieve the goals, the targets that we have, for example, in the climate law, to reduce our emissions at least 55%. But of course, we have to do that in a safe way. I mean, consistency, coherency among all the files is very important, because we need a Fit for 55 with ambition, but also balanced, because if it is not balanced, we can have problems in the next years. So I really like to go faster, for example, in renewables, but of course, keeping in mind these things that I have mentioned, because I think it's one of the most problematic points that we have. But for example, in renewables, we should work to avoid the bottlenecks that we have in Europe, in some countries, to implement these new technologies, but of course also balance with the public acceptance. So I think this is one of the challenges that we have in the renewable directive, for example. But of course, for example, renewable directive, energy efficiency directive, and taxation, I think that are files that we have to go faster, but as I said before, maintaining the consistency and coherency of the whole package. I think this is the most important thing.
Thank you, Nicolas Casares. Jamel Lofredo, maybe a view from your side. Do you believe some elements of the Fit for 55 package need to be fast-tracked or maybe amended to take account of the situation that we have on energy markets?
Well, I think that the priority, more than the Fit for 55, is the implementation of the clean energy package, honestly. The measures on demand-side flexibility in the electricity directive were not yet implemented in many member states. Mr. Gonzalez Casares was rightly making the point that as long as we need to rely on gas power plants, we will have some times during the day in which we're going to see very high prices, because we need to cope with an increasing demand. Give consumers the incentives to use energy flexibly, and they will do so. Adela was right in saying that the more dynamic the price consumers are exposed, the more knowledgeable the consumer should be. Well, the thing is that appliances or products that are facilitating flexible consumption that allow consumers to benefit from variable prices and to engage in demand response are entering consumers' homes. Electric vehicles in sales in the Netherlands were 20% of total sales this year, and consumers with electric vehicles can engage in demand-side flexibility through smart charging or through V2G, and these can help consumers basically reducing their energy bills. I think the priority, of course, in Italy should be on one side to have an ambitious Fit for 55 package to really empower consumers, shifting to energy efficiency, shifting to renewables by giving them access, for example, to installers, to one-stop shops, and by giving them access to financial incentives. But we should not really lose sight of the clean energy package. It's not that since it was adopted a couple of years ago, it's it's something that's old and that that we can sort of forget about it. I think that it's a cornerstone of the energy transition, and it's what is going to shield consumers against the volatility in gas prices.
Thanks, Jaume. Let me turn to Elisabeth Cordago. Your views on the Fit for 55 package. Do you believe some elements of it should be modified or their adoption speeded up in the context of the current high energy prices?
So I think in general, it would be good to speed up the entire really decision-making process on Fit for 55. What I'm worried about is perhaps that some parts of the package be put on the back burner in the context of spiking energy prices. And particularly, I think the process around the energy taxation directive revision, which was already politically delicate ahead of the price spike, is perhaps even more so right now. But I think it's important that the energy tax rates between gas and electricity are rebalanced in order to make way to facilitate and to incentivize really electrification. Because as long as is the case, as in many, if not most, member countries, electricity is taxed to a greater extent than natural gas, and energy tax rates do not reflect the carbon content of different fuels, then I think that sends a very mixed and confusing message to consumers and does not incentivize them to, let's say, replace their gas boiler with a heat pump. So I think really the revision of energy taxes in order to support electrification is important. And I think it also opens the question of whether there should be a redesign possibly of retail prices. As Adela said, consumers do not pay wholesale prices, they pay retail prices, and a large chunk of retail prices is precisely made up of taxes, be they energy taxes or VATs or other fees that are there to cover for structural costs, such as the coverage of subsidies for renewables. So is there a way, is there a case to be made, and I think there is, to shift, for instance, the burden of the cost of subsidies for renewables, which are behind the success story of the increase in the share of renewables in the EU energy mix, shift those across fuels, so including on natural gas, to general taxation. I think there needs to be a discussion around that. As long as the burden of additional costs on top of the wholesale price on electricity retail costs is higher, consumers are going to be disincentivized to really take a leap towards electrification.
Thanks, Elisabeth. Let me turn to Adela Tessarova now for a quick reflection on what we just heard. Do you believe some elements of the Fit for 55 package should be speeded up or maybe amended in the current context of high energy prices? We're starting the negotiation process, so maybe now is the right time to make some adjustments. What is your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you for these questions. Well, given that the package is now in the hands of the co-legislators, I think Mr. Nicolas Casares covered he covered extensively this answer, and yeah, I mean, he stressed the need to keep the package together because this is the biggest legislative package ever in the area of energy and climate. It is an enormous strain on co-legislators. I think we have some very ambitious presidencies ahead of us. Especially, next year we have French presidency. The year after we have the Swedish presidency. I'm sure the Swedish presidency will want to conclude on everything. So I think that would be a very, very quick dealing with the package. So that's one comment from my side. Second comment, I agree that we need to implement what we have in place. That's absolutely necessary. There are huge gaps. We have a good opportunity with this big MFF, very green MFF. I have, of course, listened to Elisabeth what she said, but at the same time, this is the biggest green MFF we have ever had. We have the biggest financing available for green investment, thanks to the recovery fund. And, we can, more is always possible, but I think there is enormous financing going in the direction of energy efficiency, especially in the recovery funds. And this is an opportunity not to be wasted. Third comment, we need active consumers. That means we need to implement the existing legislation, but I think the consumers need to want to become active, and I think the current energy price environment is waking up people who, if I simplify, we have a 10% of the population which cannot pay their energy bills. And then we have 90% of the population which very easily can pay the energy bills and they never think about it. And these people are now waking up. And this is good because unless consumers want to become active, no legislation in the world is going to make them active. We need to remove barriers. I fully agree. But one of the barriers is the fact that people are not interested. And this is a non-negligible barrier. When it comes to retail prices, last comment, member states have the right to impose taxation. And no European Union can take this right away from them. What we have in the EU is harmonized rules for these taxes. One of them is the Energy Taxation Directive. The other one is the VAT Directive. So the Commission has put forward a review of the Energy Taxation Directive to precisely put some order in the way taxes on energy are levied, and the question of electricity versus gas is one of those that are being looked at. But this is a member state's right to impose taxes on energy, and this right is not going to go away. So what we can do at EU level is to look at the consistency, and this is precisely what the revision of the Energy Taxation Directive is doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Adela Tessarova. And indeed, the attitude of consumers towards energy pricing is something which is quite cultural and not something that's going to change overnight, I'm afraid. Julio Castro, a question to you now. Again, some have warned that fossil fuel prices are likely to remain quite volatile in the long run, precisely because of the energy transition. Do you share this analysis, and how do you believe policymakers can prepare for this?
That's a good one, Frederick. Well, to the extent that from a technological point of view, the storage is not fixed in the coming years, which is something that, at least for a planning on a 5-year business plan, that is the case. It is right to say that the backup with the lesser emissions will come from natural gas. Natural gas will come either from a pipeline or a LNG, and it's available. So the good answer is that we will have the lights on, and by having more renewable energy, that is the most competitive one in terms of LCOE of costs these days, the bills will be lowering, but we need the backup. So we need to focus on the backup price and the way of implementing this backup. There's a lot of written thinking on the capacity mechanisms. There's many methods. There's different exposures, different countries looking at different ways of doing things. But what we have to do is, at the same time that we are relying on renewables, we need to have an answer. We need to have a method, and we cannot only rely on the marginalistic market, so that the income of this backup, it's opportunistic somehow, depending of the moments in the future where these price spikes are present. Why? Because apparently it looks like nobody believes in those prices being fair. At least that is what happens in the media and in some of the institutions in Spain, where you are having a price that is clearly, in terms of the figure that you're using, high, let's say 200 euro per megawatt hour, clearly a high price. Well, that is unacceptable. Given that is unacceptable, you're greedy and something has to be done. When the price is in the surroundings of 50, nobody says anything about. Well, clearly we have different tools, either technological or financial, to have a more smoothened cost curve of the backup, by having more reserves of the fossil fuel that you may be using. That can be done either on a physical way in storages or tanks of LNG, or from financial contracts or financial hedges, which is a way of storing. Or you can have a mechanism that puts the costs on a term approach, so that are applied to the different bills in a different way, not charging daily and hourly that backup cost expectation that the investor on that technology wants to be remunerated. So I do see that there will be volatility, but I do not see, and I do not agree, that the current situation that is very specific is the one that we are seeing twice a year in the coming 25 years. No, and it cannot be. Companies and customers can either physically or financially hedge positions, and guaranteeing and having a more average cost of the backup in the future, so that the outcome in terms of the bill is absolutely acceptable. So a lot to be done, a lot to be learned, but not exactly for the current situation where this spot market, it's somehow frightening all of us. And there's tools of doing this. From my career and from my experience in the LNG and natural gas life, which is the one that is driving the high cost of backup, there's a lot of tools, contracts, term contracts, long-term contracts, financial storage, virtual finance for the storage, taking care hubs and different hedging options. And of course, the physical storage is always helping, but of course it has to be remunerated, and you have to compare either if it's efficient or if you need more flexibility on supply. Sorry by my long answer, but I think that this question and this answer, maybe it's the key for the coming 5 years of survival of the current market.
Thanks, Julio Castro. Let me put the question to you now, Nicolas Gonzalez Cassares. Do you believe Europe should be prepared for more volatility on energy markets going forward, precisely because of the green transition? And how do you believe policymakers can provide answers to this?
First, I want to say that we cannot make the green transition guilty. I think the problem is that we are delayed in the green transition, because if we have more renewables by now, we will have less problems with these prices. But yes, probably we can see volatility, as for example Acer has mentioned, and other actors mentioned, that we can expect volatility in the fossil fuels market and the energy market in the next months. But I don't want to see the same problem year after year until 2030, because this is going to be a mess for citizens. I think that we need to protect consumers and also companies that we have in Europe. And of course, we need affordable prices for all of them, because yes, we can pay bills for vulnerable consumers, but at the end of the day, we also need to be competitive in the global marketing with our companies and our productions. So we need to have a good balance in energy prices. I think it's crucial for the next years. Of course, we need to deploy more renewables. We need this backup that Jose Castro mentioned before, and we need also to be more efficient. But of course, we have to think about we are going to need huge amounts of electricity and green electricity. So we have to put our investments in the place that we need. For example, I want to mention that because I don't like the proposal of when it comes to the taxonomy to see natural gas as a green investment. I think this is not sustainable, and it's going to make a lock-in investments, putting money on gas infrastructures and take out the money from renewables. I think, okay, we can make investments in natural gas, but they are not greener anymore. So I think this is one point. But of course, in the next year, we need affordable prices, and we, as consumers, also need to see how renewable energy decrease the bill of consumers, because it's going to be the best answer for consumers to get engaged in this green transition.
Thanks, Nicolas Casares. We're getting closer to the end of this online event, but before we close, I would like each one of you to reflect and maybe summarize in just a couple of sentences what you would want our audience to take away with them as the main message. And so let me turn, therefore, back to Adela Tessarova for this.
Well, thank you. Well, I really hope that the current high price crisis will bring something positive. And I hope the positive thing that it will bring is that it will wake up consumers. I said it earlier, but I will repeat it because I think it's important. Energy consumers have been very passive. People are experts on tariffs for mobile phones and experts in technology of mobile phones. And people don't understand anything about energy. And energy is much easier, simpler than mobile phones. And I think it's time for us to become experts in energy. And for us to, all of us ordinary people, to be able to choose the right tariff, to be able to change tariff, to be able to produce energy ourselves. Because, the cheapest renewable energy is the one we produce with our house. And if it's a building block, it's even easier because there is a lot of space for solar panels on top. So, I think it's really, I hope that the positive thing that this crisis will bring is it will wake up all of us consumers to become actors of our own life and to actively decide our own destiny when it comes to energy. Thank you.
Thanks, Adela Tessarova, for this positive message. Let me go back to Nicolas Gonzalez Cassares for your own closing statement.
I want to say that citizens must know that we are concerned about these prices, but the cost of not doing the transition, the green transition, is higher of going for this way. I guess the prices get normal in coming months, But of course, we have to keep in mind that to protect ourselves, to protect our transition, and fight against climate change, we need to speed up this ecological transition.
Thanks, Nicolas Casares. Let me turn now to Jaume Lofredo. What is your own main message from today's event?
Well, I hope that the Fit for 55 and the implementation of the clean energy package, which should happen as soon as possible, really empowers consumers to be active and to improve the energy efficiency of homes, to switch to heat pumps, to install rooftop solar panels, and to be active through demand-side flexibility. And at the same time, I can say that ourselves as consumers groups, we are committed to help consumers become active in the energy sector by providing them advice. And we hope that our collaboration with the Commission on this, which so far has been quite fruitful, can continue, and that we can continue cooperating in the future.
Thanks, Jaume. Elisabeth Cordago, what is your own main message for our audience today?
I hope that from these spiking energy prices, we will see a boost of renewable energy investment, but also energy efficiency investment, because ultimately, I think that the best way to protect consumers is to enable them to cut their energy consumption and therefore their energy bills. I also think that and hope that it will prompt a reflection in terms of the design of retail energy prices, particularly using the lever of energy taxation, because I think we cannot expect consumers to be smart about their energy consumption unless the price signals are right. And as long as the electrification of their heating system, for instance, remains financially discouraged through lower costs of natural gas heating, I think that is going to be a bit of a difficult decision to ask of consumers.
Thanks, Elisabeth. And Julio Castro, now you have the privilege of closing today's event. What is your own main message for our viewers?
Let's take advantage from. Crises make you stronger. That's common in life. So the European Union should be focusing on less carbon emissions, more renewables and storage are needed. In order to do that, we need less taxes and charges on the bills, and we need more regulatory stability. Instead of talking about Fit for 55, we like to say that we are ready for 55. Iberdrola is ready to invest.
Thanks, Julio Castro. I think that wraps up today's event. A big thanks to Iberdrola for supporting it. A big thanks to our panelists for the time you took to be with us today. And to our viewers, of course, for following us. If you've missed the beginning of this event, you can watch it again on YouTube and other social media. And if you're interested to learn more about upcoming events on Euractiv, please visit our website, events.euractiv.com, for more. We hope to see you again soon. In the meantime, take care and stay safe. Bye-bye.